Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 129 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. This week we're talking with Scott Johnston, the author of a new satirical novel, Campusland. Yes, that's exactly what you expect from that title, and trust me, those woke universities had it coming. I've been a fan of Ricky Gervais in recent months, and it has nothing to do with his comedy or his stand-up or anything about his talent per se. Few stars fight as hard against PC culture as Gervais, and for that reason alone, I don't give a darn about his political leanings. Yeah, he's a lefty, but I care about the bigger picture here. Now, two of his fellow left-of-center comics are sounding the alarm about woke culture, and their names might surprise you. Sarah Silverman made headlines recently when she revealed how she lost a really cool movie gig for appearing in blackface more than a decade ago. Did it matter that she repeatedly apologized for that particular incident? Of course not. Did it matter that she's trying to describe bigotry in our culture through that episode? Of course not. She got canceled anyway. It sounds like she's furious, and I don't blame her. She should be. And then there's Jim Gaffigan. The country's premier clean comic shared his frustrations with film critics, I guess that means me, during a chat on the Joe Rogan Experience recently. Now, Gaffigan wasn't displaying a thin skin about bad reviews, mind you. He showed how some critics raked his recent film, Being Frank, over those proverbial coals for not adhering to Identity Politics 101. Again, he sounded really angry about the whole situation, even if he tried to downplay his frustrations. Now, conservatives have been blowing the whistle on cancel culture for a while now. Silverman and Gaffigan stayed on the sidelines up until very recently. But now, as both are suffering as a direct result of this toxic culture, now they're speaking out. Well, good. They shouldn't stay silent anymore. We need their voices in the fight against identity politics, the scourge of our age. Of course, this doesn't mean Silverman and Gaffigan have been changed in any real way. Silverman, if you look at her Twitter feed, is hardcore liberal like she was the day before. Gaffigan told Joe Rogan he's a lefty too. But the more liberals who get pulled over by the PC police, the better the chances of the rest of us have of defeating this poisonous movement together. Now here's the tweet of the week. This week's winner is Piper Perabo. Who? Oh, come on. She's been in Coyote Ugly, Covert Affairs. I think she's even got a role in the new Angel Has Fallen, which comes out this month. She's busy, but not too busy to marinate in mainstream media lies. Am I right? Here, she's displaying either pure ignorance or an ability to believe the distortions ladled out by our fraudulent press. Here we go. I stand with Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar against racist intimidation by the President of the United States. Trump is teaming up with a foreign government to punish members of the U.S. Congress on the basis of his own slander. When will we hold him accountable? #impeach. Is that impeach hashtag pre-installed in every actor's smartphone at this point?
Political Spirits, the weekly conservative podcast that says the left and right should have a few drinks and talk. The only podcast that intersperses commentary with the sound of pouring alcohol. Host Franklin Rye, an experienced governmental affairs professional, offers analysis, commentary, and conservative solutions mixed in with amusing anecdotes about the sausage-making process. Ever wonder how democracy is like a Chevy Suburban? Did the Beatles really write conservative songs? How a Democrat politician is like the Arquillians in Men in Black. Add to that occasional historical episodes with a patriotic bent, kept at 30 minutes or less, perfect for a commute, and you have a podcast recipe to serve conservatives, political news and opinion junkies, and those who just wonder how on earth we reached the point where so many in our country think patriotism is a dirty word. Please join us at Political Spirits. That's politicalspirits.libsyn.com or on Twitter at Franklin Rye.
This week's HiT tip of the week is The Boys. Yeah, I hate that title too. It's a new Amazon series based on the edgy comic book of the same name, so I guess they couldn't change it. The show follows a group of corporate superheroes who aren't as kind-hearted and decent as they appear. And that's being generous. They're stone-cold killers. They'll just destroy anyone in their way. Now, the boys in the title, they're a group of vigilantes who are out to stop these super-duper phonies. Now, I've only seen the first few episodes of the season 1. There's already been approved a season 2, so that's on the way. But so far, it's a pretty impressive take on the shop-worn superhero saga. I mean, I know we've seen a million of these movies. We'll see a million more. I'm not technically burned out, but I'm also ready, willing, and able to see kind of a spin on the old superhero template. And this is certainly that. I think my head was spinning by the time I watched the end of Chapter 2. Now, it is very dark at times. You look at the rating on the particular episodes. It's nudity, it's violence, you name it, it's in there. It almost feels like it's trying too hard to be as gritty as it is. But again, that premise is really rock solid, and the cast sells it. One of the surprises for me is I don't think I've seen this actor before, Jack Quaid. If the name sounds familiar, it should. He's the son of Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan. Their marriage didn't last, but they produced a pretty good actor. And it's funny, if you look at his face, Jack Quaid's face, you can see elements of both stars there. I think from the nose down, it's all Dennis, and from the nose up, it's Meg Ryan. But he's pretty good here. He's playing a character who's a bit of a nebbish, who's kind of coming into his own as he's realizing he has to help fight these superheroes, and I'm impressed. Now, like I said, there's a second season already on the way, maybe a few months before we see it, but I recommend you give season 1 of The Boys a try. A quick heads up, the 5th episode supposedly packs a lot of anti-faith elements in the story. It's par for the course in Hollywood these days, and maybe we shouldn't be too surprised, but I just want to let people know before they see it. Maybe they'll want to steer away from it. It's certainly up to them.
Don't touch that dial. You're listening to my daddy's podcast.
The absolute insanity swirling around college campuses today is crying out for satire. Now, the folks on late-night TV, well, they're sleeping on the job. They have no interest in making fun of this. Stand-up comics, not many of them tackle this topic in particular. Saturday Night Live, oh, they are steering clear of anything close to a college campus. What a shame. Enter Scott Johnston. Now, Scott isn't a comedian, nor is he a not-ready-for-primetime player. He's a businessman and an entrepreneur who's had enough about those headlines regarding campus culture. And he decided to do something about it. His new book, Campusland, is his response. And it's beautifully written and so close to reality, you think you're reading some breaking news. The funny part is, as he describes in this upcoming interview, he wrote this a while ago, but boy, it just seems so pertinent, so fresh, so real. Maybe that's a bad thing, but it's certainly a credit to his writing. Scott shares how the book's premise came to be, trying to pitch it to different agents, and also why he thinks the modern college campus is beyond repair. It's pretty depressing, but I think he's onto something. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Campusland author Scott Johnston. Well, Scott, I often ask authors what inspired their latest book, and it's pretty obvious what hit home for you here with Campusland, but was there a particular incident that really kind of made you rush to the word processor or the laptop or whatever authors use these days?
Well, there were a couple. Okay. The first was about 3 or 3.5 years ago. I went to a one-day symposium at Yale on the future of free speech, and 200 students showed up and physically tried to shut the conference down. Now, there was a lot of security, and they were prevented from doing it. But as I walked out through this sort of phalanx of angry, shouting kids, and someone was actually spit on, too, and they were swearing at us. It was unbelievable. I started wondering, why hasn't anyone used – campuses are essentially going crazy, culturally speaking. And why hasn't anyone used this for a satiric novel, given it the Tom Wolfe treatment? And yes, Tom Wolfe wrote I Am Charlotte Simmons, but that was about 14 years ago. It was really about hookup culture. And 14 years ago was a million years ago culturally. So that's when the idea germinated, but I honestly didn't know anything about writing fiction. It was not on my bucket list to write a novel. And I didn't do much with the idea. Toni Morrison said, and I only learned this last week when she died, she said, if there's a book out there you want to read and it hasn't been written, you should write it yourself. Well, I didn't know that at the time. Mm-hmm. So fast forward to my college reunion, which was also at Yale, and I'm holding the door open one evening for an undergraduate girl, and she stops dead in her tracks and accuses me of patriarchy for holding the door open for her. And I said, I thought I was just being nice, and my mother would be very upset if I walked through that door first. So we had a standoff that lasted, I think, about a minute. And I think her principles yielded to boredom before mine did. So that's essentially the moment I decided that I was going to figure out how to write a novel.
I love it and I hate it at the same time, because that is where we are. It's funny because I have 2 young sons and I drill into them every opportunity. Hold the door open for anyone who's behind you. It's just what you do. And of course they're slow in the uptake there, but they'll get it. But that's not even a feminist thing to me. That's just like common courtesy. But often that puts you in the crosshairs. You've got this idea. The inspiration is all over the country. At the same time, it almost strikes me as a hard nut to crack from a satirical point of view, because it is so over the top at times. Was that a struggle when you first started writing the book, that, hey, I'm writing stuff that sounds crazy, but that's the way it really is? Do I ramp it up? Do I kind of underplay it? Was there sort of I think the book works beautifully, but was there a moment early on where you struggle with the tone? Because it seems like this is really hard to capture.
Well, you've raised an interesting point on several levels. I knew right off the bat that satirizing something that was already self-satirical was a unique challenge. And there have been some people who said, some early reviewers of the book who said, well, this is, obviously an exaggeration. Well, really, it isn't. There's nothing in the book that's exaggerated. Until the climax of the book, essentially everything was taken directly from real life. Things that really happen. Mm-hmm. And one concern I had is, I finished writing this about 1.5 years ago. It takes a while for big publishers to take something and get it to market. So I was worried about, honestly, the culture like running past me during that time, like sort of antiquating my book before it could even get to market. And I'll give you one small example. I used the word woke in the book, and I put quotation marks around it. And if I were writing that today, I wouldn't put quotation marks around woke. I would put, it's probably in the Oxford English Dictionary.
Interesting point. By the way, reading the book, it feels like it was written yesterday or the day before. So it doesn't have anything that's dusty about it, which is both good on you, but also maybe sad on the culture at large. I don't want to get into the weeds as far as, authors always struggle to get agents and get publication rights and get the ball rolling. Given the material at hand, did you struggle with getting the deal approved, or did it work kind of fairly easily by writing standards?
Well, it's sort of a funny story. I wrote it first, and initially I was writing it to amuse myself. And I finished it, and I thought, I had a couple friends read it, and then I got the notion that, maybe it wasn't so bad. And I read everywhere you had to find an agent. Well, I didn't know how to find an agent, but there's lots of advice on the internet, and they say go to all these agency websites and find the agent that looks like he's looking for your particular book. Well, practically every agent these days seems like they're looking for LGBT memoirs, and at least this is not my industry. I did send it to one that I had met. You're supposed to send something called a query letter. Mm-hmm. I sent a query letter to one agent that I happened to meet, just a sort of friend of a friend of a friend. And 3 weeks later, I got back an email that said, I don't think I want to read this. But at the same time, and there are going to be a lot of people who don't want to read it. At the same time, I did have, there was one person I knew from college who was in the publishing industry, exactly one. And I thought she, I hadn't seen her in a while, I sort of see her at reunions. And so she's a senior editor at St. Martin's. So I sent it to her, and in the hopes that she would point me to an agent, because all the websites of the publishers say, do not send us anything. We won't look at it. We won't return it, blah, blah. And So I sent it to her, and 2 weeks later, St. Martin's bought it. So it turned out to be pretty easy.
By the way, I'm not your marketing agent, but maybe on the second printing you should have a quote from that one agent. I don't even want to read this. I think that says it all. Let's before we get into some of the elements of the book, do you do extensive research? You kind of had a sense of what's going on. Anything that you found during your research that was intriguing, above and beyond maybe the obvious stuff? Just give us a quick peek at that process.
Well, I did do a lot of research into Title IX and what Title IX has become. And it's become this just, multi-headed monster. And most people still think of Title IX as something to sort of even out sports teams and colleges. Mm-hmm. And that was really the initial intent of it and the initial effect. But it's become something much, much, much more. The Obama Education Department sent out this letter called the Dear Colleague letter, which has become infamous. That basically mandated that colleges round up all these sexual predators that are apparently out there. It's been misused. It lowered the standards of evidence and due process. And I'm sure you've heard stories about how boys get thrown out of colleges just on the basis of an accusation.
Yeah.
That happens a lot. There are currently 500 lawsuits from those boys against the various colleges that have railroaded them out. And, perhaps in some cases they did do things, but in a whole lot of cases, the accusations are false. They even use Title IX as a verb now, as in, if you break up with me, I will Title IX you. So a lot of girls know it's a weapon they can use. And they use it. And unfortunately, it takes away. I mean, I have a college-age daughter. These things concern me. But all this nonsense around it is taking away time and money and resources from the cases that might actually have some merit. So I did a lot of research into that. And if you read Campusland, you'll come away understanding how it works. But I actually make it funny.
That you do. I was kind of curious, some of the characters here, when you first read them, they kind of feel like archetypes. The main character is pronounced F, E-P-H.
F, yeah, Ephraim.
Yeah, but that's sort of what he goes by in the book. Yeah. He's a liberal guy, but he wrestles with a lot of kind of a common sense capability within him. And Lulu just seems like a Kardashian wannabe, but she has layers and she's interesting. Was it sort of part of your mission here is that you were going to touch on things we instantly recognize, but at the same time, make it unexpected, just as a storyteller. Maybe you can kind of.
Well, Lulu's kind of marriage between a Kardashian and a New York socialite wanted it girl. There was someone named Tinsley Mortimer, someone like that, and she almost came to life a little bit in the college admissions scandal. That I forget the girl's name out at USC who. Was angry at her movie star parents because they ruined her Instagram career. Right. So I'm like, my goodness, that's Lulu. I mean, that was a dumber version of Lulu. My Lulu is actually quite clever and smart.
Yeah.
F is sort of, I'd like to think F is sort of a nuanced character because the setting is Devon University, which is essentially an Ivy League stand-in. And F is from the deep South. He's from rural Alabama. So he's a cultural outsider, but he desperately wants to leave Alabama behind. He liked nothing about his roots, and he doesn't want to be stereotyped by all his liberal friends at Devon as being from, gun-toting, pickup driving, Trump voting, deep South. So he's reinvented himself. He's a very smart guy. He teaches 19th century English literature and he's up for tenure. And he essentially tries to keep his background a secret, because he doesn't want to be the cultural explainer, the hillbilly elegy guy who has to tell everyone what it's really like down there around Trump people. And he's a good liberal, like everyone in the bubble, and he desperately wants to stay in the bubble because it's a very pleasant place. I've been in the bubble. I went to Yale and I was an adjunct professor there. It's a really pleasant place to be. So that's the sort of setup of that character. But because he's from the outside, there are landmines that, waiting for him that he's completely ill prepared for.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned you wrote this about a year and a half ago, and it's coming out right now. It's available actually as we speak. Are there things you would change about it? Because like I said before, it feels very of the moment. But I'm sure every artist is always wanting to go back and tweak something. Even George Lucas has, sadly done that with the Star Wars trilogy. Do you wish you could add more things? You wish you could take something away? I mean, you don't have to get specific. I don't want to spoil the story, but I'm just, as a storyteller covering a topic that's moving so quickly, is there sort of a wish that you could sort of maybe go back and noodle around?
That happens frequently, I'm told, in the artistic process. Once you're done with it, you want to go back, and I'm pretty damn happy with it. I think I made all the points I wanted to make, and in as entertaining way as possible. And I think there might be a little bit of a cultural moment here because we're about to go back to school, everybody, and all this stuff is going to heat up again, and the craziness is just. It just keeps getting worse. I mean, one school banned the use of the word manhole the other day. I think you have to call it street hole. It's just stuff that's so patently silly, but it's also dangerous because there are implications to broader society, and that's already happening. Yeah,
I think what's happening now is that you can't say certain words in the political realm, and I think it's sort of distracting us from bigger issues. One of the terms I noticed right away was first year, which you used instead of freshman. Do you know if that's actually in play now? It felt so authentic. I thought maybe it's happening across the country.
Oh yeah, I mean, I certainly drew on my alma mater for a lot of this, and there are a few places as crazy as Yale, and they are first years there,
okay.
And they have banned the use of the word master. So the houses there, which they call colleges, everyone has a master. And the idea is, you're the master of the house. Mm-hmm. It's a very old English tradition, in the sense that you've mastered something, like a master's degree. But they've banned the use of the word, and they call the masters now head of house, because somebody might be confused and think it refers to slave masters. Now, presumably, Yale is taking kids smart enough to know that words have multiple meanings.
That's right.
And that one of these has nothing to do with the other, but nonetheless, they did it.
Yeah. You said that the reviews are just starting to kind of come in for the book, and I've read a few that were very positive. I was kind of curious, outlets like that are left-leaning seem like they'd find this radioactive to be kind, and I'm not criticizing the book. I'm just criticizing the reality we live in. Have you gotten any sort of surprising reaction so far?
I got a very nice audio review from NPR, which shocked me. People will be interesting because there's actually a character in the book, and you probably haven't reached this point in the book yet, but one of the characters is looking at People magazine, and he refers to it as hideous treacle. And People is apparently they are apparently going to review the book. So I hope they look up the meaning of treacle. So I don't know what to expect. I'm going to have a lot of haters because, one of the central plot lines here is someone who's falsely accused of sexual assault. Mm-hmm. And I almost hate to say this, but yes, I make it funny. But that alone is going to drive some people over the edge. So I'm kind of anticipating people descending on Amazon and who haven't even read it and just giving me 1 star. And, I might even get doxxed. Who knows?
Yeah. The one thing I think we're kind of even dancing around, which is a central part of the book, is fear. The fear that exists on campus, the fear that you can't defend yourself, the fear that you can't express a point of view. And I think that is ultimately what's going on with, Mario Lopez had to apologize because he said that he didn't think 3-year-olds were capable of deciding their gender. And, that sounds absurd that anyone would even doubt that, but he had to kind of scramble with an apology within 24 hours. And the fear that your characters face in Campusland is palpable. Just talk a little bit about that, because that's, I know this is funny. I know it's satire. I know it's of the moment, but we're living in scary times. And the main character, if he could get dragged down or potentially attacked, any of us can.
You raise an extremely important and serious issue. So on college campuses, I know a lot of college kids. I have two myself. College conservatives live underground existences in school right now because they absolutely know if they speak up in class, they'll be penalized with bad grades. That totally happens now. The professors were liberal in my day, but they didn't do that. Mm-hmm. That's changed. And also, you might get ostracized by your fellow students, and even worse. I could go on about a bunch of incidents that have been absolutely horrible. But even in broader society, you mentioned Mario Lopez, but corporations have been essentially mau-maued into silence and towing the line. All these crazy college social justice warriors, they graduate and they take over the human resource departments and they take over foundations, and they certainly dominate the Twitter sphere, which gives them an outsized voice. And I know people who have businesses who will not speak up if they're Trump supporters because they're afraid of vengeance upon their business. Of course, this just happened in the last couple of days with SoulCycle here on the East Coast. It was found out that the owner of the business, the company that owns SoulCycle, threw a fundraiser for Trump, and all of a sudden the boycott started. And you can't have the wrong political opinion these days, or the mob comes after you. And the mob is magnified by social media. So now a friend of mine who's actually also a famous author, someone I went to college with, read an advanced copy of my book and emailed me and said, are you ready for them to attack your business? Mm. And, fortunately, I'd sold my business. So I'm in a freer position than most to be writing this book, but I fully anticipate an onslaught of some kind.
And I think the only good news in that situation is that the justice, sort of the outrage mob, if they want to come after you, they'll be distracted in a week and a half to another target. So if heaven forbid they do sort of target you, they may switch gears and when something else misspeaks. But one last question, Scott. Doing your research, seeing the book come out, being a part of this process, is there any hope, a palpable hope that things are turning the corner, that people are just getting fed up with this, that there's a frustration that everything we've discussed is just that it's crossed the line that needs to be, that you have to someone's got to stand up? Is there any sense in your perspective on that?
So within the context of college, I hate to say it, but the answer is no. I don't think there's any saving modern American universities. They are fully taken over, both the students, the administration, the boards are all cowed. I actually have a friend who's working on a model he's working on the numbers right now to raise money to start a de novo university that wouldn't do all this nonsense. It would have 20% of the administrative staff. It would have no majors that end in the word studies, no oppression studies. It would offer, tuition in, maybe $45,000 instead of $75,000. And emphasize on rigorous academics, sort of the way college used to be in America. Yeah. But I and a number of other people come to the conclusion that our campuses are too far gone to be saved from the inside, and I wish I thought otherwise.
Wow, I don't think you say that lightly, by the way. So that's dispiriting. But it's funny. I've been doing a lot of work with a movie called No Safe Spaces, and that doesn't come out until the fall, a few weeks away. But I almost feel like you have companion pieces here. That particular documentary, which looks at free speech on colleges, and then Campusland, which is a more fictional, more satirical, but they're two pieces of an important puzzle that you have to read it and you have to watch the movie when it comes to theaters. So, but Scott, thank you so much for joining the show. Scott's new book, of course, is Campusland. It's the satirical skewering that higher education's been begging for, and now it's here. Available right now on Amazon.com and other book dealers, of course. Scott, I congratulations on the book. It's terrific, and I will be beating the drum about it for the next few weeks, I promise.
I thank you very much.
Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodandToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at HollywoodandToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.